Hello everybody and welcome in. So today we're going to be recapping round number 8 of the Melbourne International Open. So if you guys don't know already, I've had 4 wins and then 3 draws in this tournament, so still undefeated. But in this round, I got to play against my first title player of the tournament. So I was playing against a candidate master. You can't see it there, but he does have a title and he was almost 2,000 rated. So I was just super excited to play against someone who was higher rated, more experienced than me. And even if I lost, I was like, that's all right. If I'm losing, then I'm still learning something and getting the chance to play against someone stronger. So here I was also happy that I got the white pieces, and I did see, thankfully, he was on the GGT boards for some of the previous rounds. So I saw that he was playing the Caro-Kann, and that was really helpful because I at least had some idea of what to prepare. So I played e4 and he played c6, and then I brought my knight out to c3 and he played d5 here. Then here I played knight to f3, which, as you can see, and maybe tell from the 2 knights out here, this is called the 2 knights attack. And the idea is that if they're capturing here, I'm just going to take back with the knight and get 2 strong pieces in the center of the board while black hasn't really developed anything yet. Now my opponent plays something that's a little bit less common, and he plays knight to f6. And here I just decide that I'm going to push forward in the center and attack this knight and make it move. Then he moves his knight forward to e4. And thankfully I had gone over my theory and my lines before playing this game today, because it's actually quite a tricky line if you don't know what you're doing. If you capture here thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to give him double pawns in the center and an ugly pawn structure, black is already equal in this position. So black is actually already reached an equal position out of the opening. After queen d5, everything is defended, and my knight is awkwardly placed over here. This pawn on e5 is also seriously under attack. So this wouldn't be a good move to play. And also if we just play something like d3, trying to kick the knight out, then after takes and takes, again, black is already really happy in this position. Even though we're going to get the pawns pushing forward in the center, there's really nothing for black to worry about after they play c5 and get to undermine my center. So here, the move to play is actually quite strange. d4 is possible, but the main theory is to play knight to e2. The idea of this move is that we're going to reroute this knight over to g3, and we're going to play d4 and c3, and now this knight has moved away from c3. We can now get in this push to c3 and get a nice chain of pawns in the center, and yeah, put this knight on g3, maybe the bishop on d3, and castle on the king side. He plays queen to b6, obviously threatening mate in 1. I wouldn't want to miss that, so I play d4, which is also a nice move for me, just getting some space in the center. And then he plays e6 here. I put my knight on g3, now putting a little bit of pressure here. He can capture, and then I can take with f or the g pawn, f or h pawn. But instead he plays c5 here. And there comes a little bit of a gambit in this opening, where I played bishop to d3, and this is basically saying if he wants this pawn, he can have this pawn, but it's actually good for me. Firstly, we can capture over here, but secondly, if he's capturing here, these pawns are now doubled, and also my opponent doesn't really get the chance to have this c pawn to start pushing down the board anymore. They've closed off their own queen's attack at f2, and I can just castle and try and play on this side of the board. So I'm very happy. If he captures this pawn, I'm happy to play on this position. I don't even need to take over here. I could, but I don't really need to grab back that pawn immediately. I'm happy to even just castle, and I think this is totally fine for me with these double pawns not being much use for black. So here my opponent played knight to c6. And at this point I was out of theory. The rest I had looked at and I'd seen theory, I'd seen games, and knight to c6 definitely wasn't a common move, so I was like, okay, this is either some crazy preparation or it's just a bad move. Here I could have actually captured on e4. And I thought about it for a little while, but I was like, I don't want to allow him the chance to start getting in this c4 or something like that. And after takes, I felt like he then got a good amount of counterplay by pushing forward, opening up his queen again, and maybe bringing up the bishop over here. What I wanted to do instead was just leave him the opportunity to take this pawn and double his pawns if he wanted to, and keep focusing on my plan and my development. But you know, I should have maybe gone, all right, let's grab this pawn, let's get this pawn off the board, take this knight out of the middle and play this position from here. But instead, I just decide I'm just going to castle. I'm going to keep that pawn under attack. If they take with the knight, I'm going to capture back with the knight and play like this. And if they take with the pawn, I'm just going to leave that there. Nothing to worry about. So after castles, my opponent plays knight takes g3. And kind of the point of not letting my opponent open up the position and allowing them to have this capture here is that I want to take with this f pawn and open up the f file and start attacking them along here. Now, this may be a little bit dubious, maybe it's not the best way to play, but I felt like this gave me some really good chances of trying to attack him, and maybe he would be a little bit worried here. I feel like he has to castle queenside, which is a bit dodgy considering these pawns have already started to push forward. When you've already pushed the c5 pawn forward, it's a lot more risky to castle on this side. And castling on the king side also looks a little bit dangerous because all of my pieces are aiming towards the king. So I like this way of opening up the f-file and still saying, you can take me, but it means that this diagonal is going to be blockaded forever by this bishop on d3. Here he plays h6, so I guess he was trying to prevent any ideas of me bringing my knight to g5 and attacking this f7 pawn. Because if so, it's not really easy for him to defend because this bishop can only go to d7. It can't really come and defend. You would have to play a slightly awkward move to maybe try and defend this pawn. Here I decide to play a3, and maybe it was better to go with c3 instead, but I felt like c3, that meant that I really had to capture back on d4 and not give him those double pawns anymore. See, if I play c3 and he takes here, I have no choice but to capture back this pawn. Like if I move the king away, then he's just going to take on c3, win a pawn and be happy. Whereas I wanted to just leave this option for him to take the pawn forever and just keep this double pawns blockaded. So I decided instead to play a3 with the idea of controlling this b4 square. And maybe I also had ideas of putting the rook on b1 and trying to push the pawns forward on b4. But yeah, I was playing a little bit dubiously here. There was definitely a lot of things that I could have improved on. I see why the engine is like, nope, a3, not so good. Just play c3, play normal chess. But I was playing courageously, I suppose. So I play a3 and he brings his bishop out to d7. Then here, I play rook to b1 with having these ideas of trying to push my pawn forward on the b file and trying to attack down this b file with the anticipation that maybe he's wanting to castle queenside and then I can just launch a huge attack over there. Because, I mean, if he castles this way, I'm so happy all my pieces are in the perfect position to attack over there. But I also wanted to have the option to attack on this side too. He now finally captures that pawn that's been hanging for a while. But now I have this option to start pushing forward with b4. Like b4 wasn't really possible in the previous position because he could just capture, but now that c pawn is gone, I can just push forward with b4, take some space, and I'm feeling pretty happy about this. I'm planning to keep on pushing forward and just start slowly attacking him on the queen side. He plays bishop to e7, developing the bishop, and I play bishop to d2. I guess in this position, I was a little bit worried I was like, what if he goes for something like knight a5? I didn't know if this was actually possible, but all right, let's play a random move. I wondered if something like knight a5 was possible. Okay, it is, but I have knight to d4. Okay. What I was thinking here was knight a5, and then I can't take here because then this rook would hang and I would be in trouble. And if I don't take, this knight is coming out to c4, and I really didn't like this idea of this knight getting in, maybe getting into the e3 square as well, attacking my rook and my queen, and I'd have to give up the bishop or something like that. So I wanted to prevent this idea of the knight coming into a5. Of course, the engine laughs at me, is like, what? Knight a5, nothing to worry about. But for me, I was a little bit scared of this idea of getting this knight in. So what I did was I played bishop d2 so that now with knight a5, I can obviously just take because now my queen defends the rook over here. So So here, my opponent decides to castle queenside, and I was a little bit surprised by this, and I was also happy about it. And as you can see, my opponent has used a lot of time on the clock. One thing that I will criticize about myself in this game is that I did not manage my time well at all. I used way too little time, whereas my opponent was using his time well, using his time to calculate and think. Obviously, he was in a worse position for a lot of the game, but he was using his time a lot better than I was. But yeah, I was really happy when he castled queenside because I started coming up with all these ideas. Like, now this bishop and this rook are aligned. I have all these ideas of trapping the queen because I'm noticing the queen has almost no squares to go. At the moment, it's only got this square to hide on. So I'm like, all right, let's go queen e1, go b5, kick the knight away, and go bishop a5 and try and trap the queen. And I was coming up with these ideas here. And I was calculating in my mind, I was like, is this a good move? Because what if it's actually not a good move? Like, what if he can get in this idea of f6, and then after b5 takes, and after takes and takes, he gets all these pawns running down the board. And this is exactly what happened in the game, actually. After a while, I realized, hey, there's nothing to worry about. Bishop a5 at the end is actually going to be a really good move, and it's going to win some material. So I play queen to e1 with these plans, and he plays f6 as I predicted. Now, Engine's best move is just to play a6 and sort of prevent this b5 push, or go knight b8. But knight b8 is a very ridiculous move to play. I don't see many people playing it. f6 was what I expected. And then I play b5, kicking the knight. He captures, and then I take. The reason why I didn't go for bishop a5 straight away was I thought after takes and takes, I'm looking at this now, I'm like, why did I not just do this? This was so much better. I should have just gone bishop a5 straight away. I'm looking back on this, and this is what I'm thinking. I should have just done this straight away. For some reason, something in my mind was thinking, there's something wrong about this. There's something wrong about playing bishop a5 straight away. I'm trying to work out what it is. Maybe it was capturing on d3. Maybe this was what I was thinking, but again, there's just bishop b4, and I'm winning material. This is hugely nice for me. So that would have actually been an improvement. The engine doesn't see a big difference, but I think that if I had not have captured this knight, my opponent would have less counterplay. So even though this was the best move, okay, engine is changing his mind whether it likes this one better or the other one better. But even though the engine doesn't see a huge difference between the moves, I think I should have just gone bishop a5 straight away and not give him the chance to get this huge clump of pawns that's running down the board. So I go bishop a5, attacking the queen, and the queen only has one square to go, and that's the d6 square. But then when the queen is going to the d6 square, I now have this move bishop e4, kicking the queen away, and then I can take this bishop on e7. And at this point, I was thinking for a little bit, I was like, what if I just repeat moves? Maybe I just go bishop a5 and just shuffle back and repeat moves. I take a draw with the CM and I leave. And I was kind of shaking. I was so nervous and I was sweating. And I was like, what if I can't convert this? What if I lose and I get swindled? This is all these pawns going here. And I was like, all right, I gotta calm down and just play the board rather than playing my opponent. And I took the bishop, and he plays rook to e8, attacking my bishop, and now I have queen to b4, defending. He now plays this move, e4, attacking my bishop over here, and I have to be a little bit careful because my opponent does have ideas. Say if I just move this bishop away, then my opponent has this idea of pushing forward with a d3, which would come with a check. But first you would maybe need to sack the rook so the bishop can't block, but like takes, d3 comes with a check, attacking the king and also the bishop. Then the king has to move, and we're going to take on e2, and suddenly black is back in the game here. So I have to be very careful about this. So here I decide what I will do is just play bishop c5, attacking the queen and giving myself the chance to move away the bishop without being under attack. The queen goes back, and then I decide to strike with b6, attacking the queen and saying, you can take my bishop, but I'm taking your queen. So obviously leaving the bishop hanging, it's a fair point. Now he captures and I take with the bishop, and my idea is that I just want to have this bishop closing in the king, surrounding all these squares around the king. He then goes queen to c3. And here, honestly, I think I should have just traded. It wasn't as pretty, but I probably should have just traded. But in my mind, I looked at this position, I saw all these passed pawns, and I wondered to myself, am I even winning here? Like, am I even winning in this position? My opponent has like a million passed pawns. Obviously, when I see that evaluation, I'm like, this is so fine. The engine thinks it's fine. But when I'm playing this game, I'm just wondering, when there's so many pawns here going towards the promotion square and I have no pawns to stop them, it felt so scary. So instead, I decided to keep the queens on the board and go for the attack. So here I play queen to d6, which chess.com is nice and calls it a brilliant move. And the idea is that if captures, I'm going to take back with the pawn. And then the threat is to play rook c1, and this would just be absolutely crushing. There's really no way to defend all of this big attack against the king. We're going to threaten to play this checkmate, but you know, first if they're playing this, I can go rook c1, pinning the queen to the king, and that would be all over for my opponent. So now my opponent goes to c6, offering the queen trade again. Again, I could have traded, but I was still just wondering, I don't know if I'm actually going to be winning here, and I didn't really trust myself to play in this game against all the pawns. So this was a little bit of self-doubt, and I was a bit scared about this whole thing, so I wanted to keep the queens on the board. I moved the queen back to e5, keeping the pressure over here, and again sacrificing my bishop with this same idea. If takes, we're going to be having a huge attack on the king here. And here he plays rook to f8. And here I still have 57 minutes on the clock and my opponent only has 17. I wish I could just go back and shake myself and say, use more time, Hannah. Just calculate and use more time. So here I trade off the rooks. I take, and then I make a move, which I think is winning, but turns out to be a big mistake. So here I play bishop to b5, and my idea was that, well, the queen has really nowhere to go, and then I'm just going to trade off the queens. So basically my idea was that after the queen moves, after the queen moves, I'm going to trade off the bishops, and then I'm going to take on g7, and then I'm attacking the rook. And it's just going to be a huge attack. And I just totally missed this very, very, very simple idea that he had queen c2. And suddenly my opponent was the one who was attacking me, which was just, suddenly the tables have turned. So here the threat is to come in with the queen, or whatever you're going to come in with, and also he's attacking my rook here. So I trade. Now apparently here there is still one way to win, which is absolutely crazy, and the engine doesn't see it until after a while. There's one way to win, and you just ignore the threat and you play h4, and after takes the king goes to h2, and after queen c2 defending, you just go queen d6, and say after the rook defense, bishop d7 takes, and then after queen f8 there's a checkmate over here, which is yeah, once you see it you're like, oh cool, that's the idea. But playing h4 in a OTB game, that's way out of my league. That's way out of my league here. When my rook is hanging with check, everything is hanging pretty much. But it would have been a very cool move if I found it. But I think the mistake was that bishop b5, right? Because I didn't see this, and I totally didn't see this h4 idea. So even though the engine is still like, oh, you're still winning here, your mistake is trading off the bishops, I just didn't see h4. So instead of bishop b5, maybe I could have just taken this pawn over here on g7, and this would have been a simpler way to play. Then we can go for bishop b5 after this, because here, if the queen takes, now the queen is coming over here and taking this bishop, threatening this rook as well. So there's a big difference about that in the position. But instead I trade, and no, it's a draw. And here I just check, and I check, and then it's all over. The interesting thing, if he decides to block with the rook here, queen g8 and king d7 is winning. So I was wondering what would happen if after queen g7 here, rook f7 was played. And then I did manage to calculate that there was this winning line. So first we sacrifice the bishop, king takes, then we check with the queen, force the king back onto the 7th rank, and then we use the rook to come in, and then after the king comes here, we can take over here and hopefully win this game. Probably win this game, but I don't know, considering the rest of it. So my opponent was forced to just repeat moves. That was the point here. I was like, there's not really the chance for them to do anything else in this position. So they just had to repeat moves, and so did I, because if I didn't repeat, if I tried to play anything else, I was just completely losing. I was just completely losing if I played anything else. So after this, you know, if I decided to, I don't know, I'm trying to think if there's any way I could have played on, but there is really no way. There's nothing I could have done because this rook is hanging. They're also threatening f2 with some idea of a checkmate. Like, for example, if let's just make a move here. Sorry, let's just make a move here. There's this queen f2 move, and then we're in a lot of trouble. Even if the rook is moving over here, check, and then they can sack the queen and checkmate me. So it was just over at this point, and I had to take this draw. And it is not every day that I say, oh no, I had to take this draw against the CM who was almost 2000 rated. But obviously, considering how the game was going and I was completely winning, I would have really liked to have the win, of course, but I was happy that I was still undefeated going into the final round, and I had overall been having a great tournament. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope you enjoyed the recap, and have a wonderful day. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!